Welcome to the Board of Directors Reconvened meeting from April the 21st. The meeting was recessed in order for the Board of Directors to address amending the 2020 CDBG plan. We would also like to welcome Directors Hendricks, Richardson, Webb, Peck, Fortson, and Vice Mayor Wyrick, who are participating with us via video conferencing. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Director Hendricks? Director Richardson?
Here.
Director Webb?
Here.
Director Peck?
Here.
Director Hines?
Present.
Director Wright?
Here.
Director Campuris?
Present.
Director Fortson?
Here.
Director Adcock?
Present.
Vice Mayor Wyrick? He's there. And Mayor Scott.
Present. Madam Clerk, if you would please read item 1 for the first time, or only time, rather.
A resolution to approve the inclusion of tenant-based rental assistance, CDBG-CV and HOPWA-CV, and the CDBG home and HOPWA sources and uses of the projected 2020 funds in the City of Little Rock's annual action plan and for the purposes.
Before we take a vote, we have a question from Director Adcock.
Mayor, would you please tell us what this money is going to be spent for?
Instead of that, I'll ask the Director Kevin Howard, please explain. We'll allow the detailed expert share.
Good.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, board members, the money that we receive under the CARES Act will go for activities under CDBG, which includes economic development, public services, and administration.
Okay, I noticed here it says tenant-based rental assistance.
Yes, that's under HOPWA, Housing Opportunity Persons with AIDS. Under that current program right now, we provide tenant-based rental assistance, supportive services, and STROM-U, which is short-term rental and utility assistance for people with HIV and AIDS.
Okay, would you tell people who is qualified for this assistance?
Any person that meets the income guidelines under CDBG, which is 80% of the area median income.
Okay, and what other qualifications for this funding? I don't want everyone to think this funding is available in your office tomorrow. It has all kinds of people calling, wanting assistance. So can you be more specific of who will qualify for rental assistance under this?
Yes, so under tenant-based rental assistance under HOPWA, it will be a person that is deemed that has HIV or has been diagnosed with AIDS. They would receive assistance that meet the income guidelines.
Is that the only difference that this has got in it?
Yes, under under HOPWA.
Okay, and what are the other changes that we're making to the funds?
So this is just for the CARES Act. I think the next item on the agenda will be for the amendment.
Okay, to save you having to come back, because I'll have the same question then, can you tell us?
So under the amendment, we receive waivers for the actual funding that we receive on our annual allocation of funds for fiscal year 20. And the only thing that we're doing under that that's going to be a little bit different is we apply for waivers to, under the home program, provide tenant-based rental assistance for citizens in the City of Little Rock. And that will be the 80% of the area median income. 90% of that funding has to be applied to people that receive fund that are 60% of the area median income, and the other 10% would be for 80%.
Since usually people come to your office to apply for this, and now your office is closed to the public, how would a person apply for these funds?
A person will be able to apply for the funds. We'll have a link on the City of Little Rock's website, and we are working through the details. We'll have an application for the Small Business Emergency Assistance Program. We'll have a link on the City of Little Rock's website where they can apply for, and also they can call our number at 501-371-6825. We are answering the phones too as well.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, I move for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Now going to open a public hearing for item number 2. Madam Clerk, would you please read the resolution?
A resolution authorizing the city manager to submit the approved amended 2016 to 2020 consolidated plan and the 2020 annual action plan for CDBG Home, HOPWA, CDBG-CV, and HOPWA CV entitlement funds to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and to execute agreements with approved applicants and for the purposes.
Move for the adoption of the resolution.
Well, 1 second, Director Adcock. We're still in the public hearing now that the resolution has been read. Are there any questions? Anyone speak for or against? Anyone speak for or against? That being none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 You stopped her motion. She's got to make the motion. Somebody's got to second.
I got to close the hearing. I'm sorry. Now that there are not any more, there was no one here to speak for or against this amendment. We'll now close the hearing. Director Adcock.
Now I move for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
There's a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
There's a
Second.
motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting adjourned. We'll now enter into our agenda meeting. Today, again, I'm very appreciative to the board members who are active today through via conferencing for today. In today's agenda meeting, we'll be setting the board agenda for May the 5th. We have one modification for tonight's agenda, and that's a resolution to amend the PepsiCo Incorporated pouring rights. And that's all those in favor. Is there a motion to add that
So
to the agenda?
move.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. That modification has been added to our agenda. We can now proceed with the review of the proposed agenda. Board members, are there any questions from items 1 through 6? Seeing none, board members, are there any questions regarding items 7 through 8?
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to have a presentation on 7, please.
Yes, ma'am. Director Collins, if you would. And as you come, I will give a brief description on item number 7. Many of the board members, I believe on Friday or late last week, received an executive summary of item number 7. Item number 7, I wanted to share with you, it was derived through one of the things when being elected to office, we definitely shared and coming into office the need to streamline planning and development zoning laws to increase and generate activity, but do it in a balanced approach to ensure not only streamline activity for builders, developers, and contractors, but also for community members to play a role in that process. And so that's number 1. Number 2, we have had these particular planning and development and zoning laws for quite some time. And it was a time for a refresh and a revision of all of our planning and zoning development laws, ordinances. And so through the past, all of 2019, we had a red tape committee comprised of individuals who are generally involved in the planning and development and zoning commission arena and understand different things that have both been a positive and or a negative impact to growth and also sustainable development. And so those members of this ad hoc group of the red tape committee have been meeting with Director Collins for the better part of a year and a half, as well as with architects and things of that nature. And so through that communication and collaboration and also just understanding it was time to really update our zoning ordinances. This is what you have today before you. Director Collins also share with you a executive summary to really go through the various details of those codes and revisions. And we wanted you to have enough time to review that, and that's the reason why you received the executive summary. With that being said, Director Collins.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. As the Mayor said, this has been a not a very long, but a long process of going through to bring forth a proposal to streamline the process. In doing so, if you have had a chance to review the executive summary, I would like to go through and hit some of those. The majority of it had to do with the alignment of private development with public works and planning and development to better serve the public for the private development portion of that. And that really took forth about 50 to 60% of those code revisions. And what that done was, if you saw it in multiple places in the code, it says replacing department designated by with a specific department in doing so. And that was trying to also keep responsibility of maintaining infrastructure after the fact, which that was Public Works responsibility and continues to be so that we are all on one page and in coordination. And they will continue to also receive any of the applications for review and comments. With that, that affected chapters 23, 29, 30, 31, and 36. So it was the majority of the code revisions. Some of the others, and I'll kind of hit some of the high points in here of where the thought process was in doing so. And I also want to preface all of this by saying that these have went before the Planning Commission and the respective board or commission prior to coming before the board today. And the Planning Commission reviewed these and approved for referral to the board. So underneath the tree, the landscape and tree protection, which we did present to the CBC, City Beautiful, let them see what it is. One of it is mainly when somebody does an infraction and take down trees, the way that the ordinance is read is replacement of those had to happen within the section. And what that meant is if there was a place that we would like to put some trees, maybe a block or two off, but wasn't particularly in that section, we couldn't do so. It was really just tied to that one section. And so just in speak with everybody, we felt that it was better to do it on a radius basis. And so we set it on a mile radius basis to give staff and also the City Beautiful Commission more leeway in choosing what projects are done within that mile radius. So it's just more of an area designation for that. Second portion in that chapter was there was a exclusion in there for landscape plans that was prepared for anything less than 2 acres. It didn't really designate anybody. It could have been prepared by just a firm, a professional, or it could be prepared by a non-professional. And just with seeing the amount of small-scale development come through, like plan developments and such, we felt that there was a need for at least a professional to prepare that landscape plan for our review, and it clarified it. So now there is no exclusion. It is they had to prepare by a design professional, and then to do that. And then the last was just a clarification. In the landscape ordinance, there is flexibility in applying landscaping design with existing sites, knowing that we can't really apply every landscaping code to every site and the site condition that we deal with. A good example is downtown in the UU, or Urban Use District, where it's called for buffers, landscape buffers adjacent to any development and the right-of-way. But as everybody at the board level and beyond knows, that in downtown, the buildings are developed to the right-of-way line. So in the redevelopment, it has always been where they request variances for these buffers and landscaping buffers, especially in a consideration where you're doing like a parking deck, where they put the parking deck right up against the right-of-way. But in another situation, they may be doing just a parking lot. And in that parking lot, they're trying to also get the buffer. So this was just to clarify that the intent is that we would like to get landscaping where possible in existing sites that's there, but understanding some of the site conditions that may constrain it to do so. And if there's any variances that need to happen, we will present it for the City Beautiful Commission. In Chapter 29, the stormwater, the main one that we did in this one is the changing of our minor storm designation. Everyone here has heard complaints about, this year's storm floods my property. Well, in our ordinances, the minor storm that we designed for was a 10-year storm. And so what we have done is we have increased that minor storm designation to a 25-year storm designation. And so all of the inlets, if approved, inlets and piping design, that is going to be the minor storm designation for all easements and storm drainage design, for that. We also was looking at erosion control. The main portion of that is not really speaking about large tracts like an entire subdivision, but we have ran into over the years smaller tracts be developed that are less than 2 acres that may have erosion control on it and may not. And pursuant to our curtain regulations and ordinances, it doesn't really call out for what we do with 2 acres or less. Whereas, so if a subdivision, and you're looking at maybe a 30-acre subdivision, has done a notice of intent with the state and also with us, and we went out there and we've inspected, and they are nearing completion, then after that, maybe an individual lot that may be at the very end of the subdivision development may have disturbed acreage putting the house in. And what we've seen is some of that erosion has gone off the site, and we go out there to look at and enforce. And the clarification is that really needs to be tied at that level to a building permit. And so that building is allowed to go out there and enforce on erosion control and put that in there. But we also made the clarification that the owner is also responsible for any off-site damage caused by such erosion. And we haven't had that happen a lot, but we have had that happen even in the past year. The other one is in that section of the chapter had to deal with the grading plan and the land alteration section particularly. It had to do with the approval of retaining walls. And in that section, they had it in there that you needed to break up the retaining wall if it gets to a certain length, the straight line length of around 200 feet. And as retaining wall design has increased over the years and progressed, really what we're looking for, if you look at the intent of the code, was to have a sort of a breakup. So you don't see this long 700-foot long retaining wall that doesn't have really any breakup. It's just right there. And so we felt with how the retaining walls are being designed now, segmental especially, that a breakup can be done also with not just a jog in the wall or a curved place, but also vegetation that may be coming down the wall. So we've seen some good vegetation that gets intermixed into a retaining wall, that can also break up the wall, because the intent is that we didn't want to see this big man-made wall running hundreds and hundreds of feet to kind of give it some natural look. And also in looking at that, the planting strips at the top, there was set a buffer. We didn't really want to look at those buffers, but give the staff an alternative to approve vegetation that lies within those buffers if there's a second wall that's going to be put on top of another wall. The reason for that is especially on segmental walls, if trees are placed in that buffer section, depends on the size of the tree growing, there's a maintenance worry that in the future the roots from those trees could grow down and separate the grid from the retaining wall face and cause a maintenance issue at that point. And so smaller shrubs and vegetation that grows up the wall would be more prudent in those types of situations. And then we also increased the fees that haven't been increased in a while for our grading permit fees, and they are detailed in the ordinance. In the streets and sidewalk, the two main that really came out that I put executive summary on was the changing of and clarification of the driveway width, and aligns it with also the off-street parking with our master street plan in the width of a residential drive and what happens as the residence comes closer to the roadway. We do have multiple homes as double car garages that are wider than 20 feet when you put them together. So the closer you get to the roadway, that 20-foot maximum width on the residential drive is really hard to achieve and be able to have any maneuvering right there by the home. So what we was looking at doing is, if it is less than 50 feet, so at the face of the house or the garage is less than 50 feet, then the width of the driveway would be able to accommodate a double car garage, but only to the width of that garage. And then when it gets past that, then they need to narrow down. So if a house is 100 foot off the right of way, then the driveway coming off the roadway would need to be narrowed down to the 20 feet, and they should have ample room to widen that driveway out before it gets to the home. We also, the next section, we aligned what was in our master street plan, which was and approved by the board, where the minimum sidewalk width within the city of Little Rock is 5 feet. But including in some other sections of that chapter, street and sidewalk, it still had the 4 foot. So it was more of alignment. In the same way with our design guidelines for the ASHTO. Currently, when it was an old design guideline, was in there for our rigid and flexible pavement design. And since then, ASHTO has come out with a design guidelines that we really need to adhere to because it's on a national basis. And so whenever those guidelines change, then ours would change, but it really aligns it with what municipalities is doing, even the state is doing on their design guidelines. And for concerns in our boundary street, and it was kind of like something that we presented several weeks back, well, maybe months back, when some duplexes come in for review. We really need to start looking at, and we want to add, right now a duplex is exempt from the boundary street conditions, applying to them. And we would really like that to include, so in duplexes we want to include them in the boundary street improvement so that we can look at what we're doing in that area, require the right-of-way to be done when they build a duplex, and then at staff review look and see what would be prudent on what boundary street improvements apply at that time. So if there's just one duplex there in a mix amongst a whole block, it would not be prudent necessarily to widen the roadway for that one lot. But depending on timing and what we do, maybe in lieu contribution or deferral may be in order. Under Chapter 31, the main section on subdivisions is we're looking to take what we would call the multiple building site plan review and bring that down to staff level review. An example would be at most of our malls, the promenade and such, where there is a development that has multiple buildings that has already came before the board for approval, either in a PCD or a zoning site plan. Right now, as it stands, every individual building, when it comes in, whether they met the code or not, for setbacks and landscaping, would come back before the board. With the removal of this, what that means is that it would only come before the board or the planning commission based upon what the zoning is if variances are needed for the respective board or commission. That it would allow staff to review multiple buildings within the site, as approved previously or as allowed per code for setbacks on any other type of zoning. And in doing so, in streamlining the review process through the planning commission, we have a subdivision committee that has been held, and it has turned into, over the years, I think when it was initially set up, they actually did take a vote in which that was removed in times past to move it on to the planning commission. So there's no vote that is being had at that subdivision committee meeting, but is held prior to the planning commission. And it typically turns into a more technical review where we're giving the comments, staff's comments and items to the applicant, and then a few questions are asked by the planning commissioners that attend. But it's really more technical driven, and we feel that we can accomplish that at a staff level and then submit all the comments that's been presented and everything to our planning commission via sharing online, with applications like OneDrive so that they can actually look at it and to see it before the commission actually meets and ask us any questions. Under our Chapter 36 zoning, what we're looking at is underneath, like I explained about multiple building site plan review, we do have certain sections of our code that require a site plan review, and it's underneath specific zoning. So it's not for every zoning designation within the city. It is for, as you see, the R6, R7, the O2, office, C2, I2, and R7A. And again, if it is one of those requirements that it meets all the code revisions, it does not require any variances to go before the planning commission. We feel that that can be handled at staff level, and if there's any variances per our codes, we can present it to the appropriate board or commission and go through the process. And it's another item is in speaking with developers, especially single-family residential developers. A demand for really smaller lots and single-family residential lots was requested. They wanted to request, that we reduce the minimum square footage of a lot, residential lot, single-family, down from 7,000 to 6,000 square feet, and correspondingly reduce the minimum width from a 60 feet to a 50 feet. And what that does is they're seeing that that is what people are wanting now, that they do sell larger lots too, subdivisions, but that is a subdivision that they believe in this economy is more viable. It increases the density and allows more for the offset of the infrastructure to the individual lots. Other section is we looked at increasing the maximum building height in certain zonings, in commercial, industrial zonings. The commercial, particularly the C1 zoning, the neighborhood commercial, it is set at a 25-foot maximum height. And just with what we've been seeing and coming in on the C1 zoning, we felt that an additional increase to 35-foot height would be prudent at this time for the development to be allowed. And we also increased the industrial districts accordingly. And that's maybe because of they have towers, they have other outside ancillary uses that they need for their industrial use, and they typically exceed the 45-foot height minimum designation in I-1. And so what we did was we tried to go across the board and set a minimum height of about 75 feet for the I-1 and I-2 uses, and also 75 feet for the I-3 heavy industrial use. And that's to hopefully allow more of the ancillary uses and the building locations around the industrial, the ability to not have to come before the Board of Adjustments for a variance in those heights. We also took the opportunity at this time, there was question raised several months ago, I think it might have been over a year ago, in regards to the Highway 10 Design Overlay District, and for staff to look at it and see, is it a viable overlay district? We did have conversations, multiple conversations with some of the directors, Director Peck and Director Hines, with that regards to look at it. And what we found is the DOD is still substantial. We are nowhere near a built-out condition in the DOD, but there's minor tweaks that we felt needed to happen for that. One of them, and the most major one, was the removal of the 2-acre limit. So less than 2 acres, they would have to come in, because they've already come through as planned developments for the board and been approved. And so we felt like that was prudent to do at this time. But also in doing so, we tried to give a little bit of caveat to allow the developers to use some of the landscape buffer that we all want right there on the Highway 10 DOD, to use that as detention. As long as it is landscaped properly. If they do underground, that's great in that area, but we also allow them to do above ground, but it's also that maintenance aspect of it that we really want to look at when that comes before us on approval. And we felt like if we did that and allowed and requested that more of a concrete channel in the middle of these detention facilities that was going to be out in front of these businesses, would keep out on the growth inside the channel, because that siltation really propagates all that growth that we see in those ponds. But we also need to be very diligent to make sure that they are up, kept up, because we really want that nice landscape buffer look in the DOD. The other items is underneath a planned zoning district, and this really accounts for the last few items on this list. Right now, the variances are always see a substantial change at staff level is set at about 5%. So when staff reviews it and the developer comes in, they have a planned development approved. If they make any changes, what we would look at is that 5% change. Have they increased it? Is it substantial? Does it need to go back before the Planning Commission and to the board? And what we're requesting, what we've seen, is that we do not feel that increasing that variance that allows staff to review for a substantial change would be a detriment to a plan development. Again, we're looking for the intent of the plan development. We've had a couple come through that were a restaurant use that were specifically for a certain entity, and that would not limit that being approved at a board level. But if it is a restaurant use, and changing of a layout, changing of signage, changing of some landscaping, it doesn't take very much to get over that 5%. And as long as that intent is there, we believe that increasing that variance approval would be prudent to streamline the process. And then one of the last ones that we have is we get a lot of variances that we take to the Board of Adjustments just for fence height. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the standard fence height might have been 6 feet, but we're getting a lot more requests for 8-foot fence height, and we don't believe with what we've been seeing out there that is a bad request. It's always been recommended for approval for the most part for staff at the Board of Adjustments, and it's been approved. So this would eliminate not a lot of cases, but really put it to where we've seen where the fence height variance is where we need to put it at 8 feet. So anything above 8 feet would come back before the Board of Adjustment for a variance approval. With that, that kind of goes over the executive summary. Be happy to entertain any specific questions y'all might have.
Director Adcock.
Can you tell the neighbor?
Director Adcock, Director Wright had
Oh, I'm sorry.
her hand up first.
Thank you.
Director Wright. Then Director Adcock.
Back to the duplexes. You know, the issue that we are basically currently dealing with, spoke to the young man yesterday that had purchased the lots over, I believe, on Wilson Road in that area. So under these new changes, you would see if that development would spur any type of widening requirement?
It would still, yes, it would still fall back underneath the boundary street, which means that we could not request widening off of their property in front of their property. But what this does is any type of rezoning, when a rezoning, we would have that opportunity to do so. That's already in there. What this is if somebody has property that wants to and is allowed to build a duplex, it gives more clarification that it is not exempt from the boundary street ordinance, that the right-of-way has to be dedicated, and then also we would go in and look at is it needed to widen that, and we could request a deferral of an action. We could request in lieu contribution if we knew that that the Public Works was going to come in and widen the roadway within the foreseeable near future as set by state law, then we could request an in lieu contribution for that. And that way we could access that funds when that widening does take place for the remainder of the roadway.
So is this specific for duplexes, or will single family be included in that as well? Because this has happened like on Foster Street. I had a developer come in and build house after house after house, and because he purchased this lot, start this house, get it built, then purchase another lot, same thing, until you have a whole row of houses but no street improvements.
It is specifically for duplexes right now, because what we was looking at when we were doing that was that intensity increase that we all spoke about. When a subdivision comes in, you understand that they're going to be single-family residential homes. In replacing of them with a duplex or multifamily scenario, you could, I wouldn't say double it. That would mean every lot goes a duplex, but you could definitely increase it by 15 to 20%, even in spot rezoning for duplexes or multifamily in a subdivision. So we did not include just straight single-family residences in this one.
So we still can have that same issue occur?
You could still have that, and in redevelopment, we've seen some of those, like you've seen some of those. We've seen more duplexes come in like that here recently than we've seen single-family.
But the issue I have and the concern I have is that people will buy these houses, I guess because they're affordable, And they'll know that that ditch is there with no curb, sidewalk, drainage, and anything. And then they complain and say, why don't the city fix these streets? Well, you knew that ditch was there before you bought the house, but it still comes back, y'all are not doing a good enough job. So that's just a dilemma that I face in Ward 6 with development coming in and just people building on these lots that don't have curb and gutter. That's just my pet peeve, Mayor. I get that a lot.
Yes, ma'am. Director Adcock, and then after Director Adcock, we'll go to Director Hines.
Jamie, where can an individual or neighborhood get a copy of this summary?
We can ensure that we post it on the website.
Okay. If we could, because I think there'd be lots of people wanting to know more details of this and what we've got here. Jamie, on the item out in Mableville, the tire store, will the landscaping that you propose do anything for these places that are a new business going in or a business going in but not having to landscape an old business location?
Right now, the short answer is, if it is zoned properly, they don't have to go through the rezoning process, and they're just redoing, moving in. We did not address that in these codes. Right now, it is still underneath the old code, which says it's based upon a percentage of what they do in the building, of cost, dictates how much they have to do outside the building and landscape.
I'm like Director Wright. I would have liked to see some of the problems that we've had, that this would be a solution to some of those. And this may be more of a solution to the city departments, but I think we need to consider some of the solutions that we need in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Director Hines?
Thank you. Jimmy, some clarification, and Tom can opine on the Highway 10 DOD, the 2 acre or less. That would only be for properties that on their own merits, because they're already developed on both sides of the property, let's say, are less than 2 acres, correct? It's not going to allow it's not going to allow a piece of property that's 4 acres to be divided into 4 1-acre lots. It's only going to be for existing properties that exist on their own less than 2 acres. Is that how this is? I'm trying to find it in the code. I think.
Okay. Well, I can answer that. It is right now, the way that it is worded, it does not pertain just to existing. It removes the 2 acre minimum in the overlay. So if somebody did have a 4 acre tract and they chose to subdivide it, new subdivision, into 4 1-acre tracts, from one 4 acre tract, that they still fall underneath this. So it removes that 2 acre minimum, whether it's existing or whether it's proposed.
Okay, because I think that I needed some clarification on that, because the real issue we had, was that if a piece of property was less than 2 acres, it had to go through the PCD process, correct?
That's correct.
And so what we ended up with is there's just some pieces of property left in the DOD that are less than 2 acres, and they couldn't ever be 2 acres because it's just not physically possible. So may want to visit with you some about that, because I think there may be some issues with being able to subdivide. I think if we were taking care of the existing properties that are physically, Tom, do you see where I'm driving at here? That I think protecting the 2 acre minimum on lots larger than 2 acres is probably important to my constituents out there, and I'll have to ask Director Peck her thoughts on that too, because she shares that DOD. But I think on my big issue is on these existing lots that just are less than 2 acres because they're been developed around. I think that was really what I thought we were trying to address. So we'll visit offline about that.
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor Wyrick. And then after Vice Mayor Wyrick will be Director Webb. Vice Mayor Wyrick? Vice Mayor Wyrick? All right, Director Webb, we'll go to you and then come back to Vice Mayor Wyrick. Can we unmute Director Webb? Director Webb, are you ready? Oh, 1 second, Director Webb. We're going to get your volume up. That means she can, Director Webb?
I don't think they can hear, Mayor. Several of them, Mayor, have been signaling they can't hear.
1 second, our tech professionals are working out the kink.
Director Wyrick is on mute, it looks like.
And so is Director Webb.
She's unmuted now.
Vice Mayor Wyrick? Director Webb? Give us 1 second. Do we have an ETA? 2 minutes? All right. If directors, if you have a question that you can quickly text to Allie, let's do that. Oh, sounds like we're back on. All right. We'll go to Director Webb.
No, thank you. I didn't have a question. I just was making sure y'all knew we could. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Mayor Wyrick. Thank you, Director Webb.
Thank you, Mayor. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. All right. Jamie's presentation, I'm sure, was very thorough, but I missed the first part and I missed the last part. So if I ask a question that's out of order, y'all just tell me and I'll call him on the phone and ask him. But Joan asked the question about the tire store in Mableville. And y'all remember I was all over that situation because I was concerned about the way it looked. It was a non-conforming use, and we did a zoning for that one. If you're going from a non-conforming use to a zoning, would you not have landscaping requirements kick in?
If, Vice Mayor, if they were not doing anything to the building, the answer to that is no.
Okay.
Unless it was a requirement as a planned development that they was coming through, and it was set specifically as a planned development requirement.
Okay. Well, you know, we have a lot of that in Southwest, and it doesn't improve our neighborhoods, and it doesn't improve the looks of our businesses. So we need to figure out a way how to help with that situation. Under this 25-year storm designation, going from a 10 to a 25, so we had that subdivision on Our Spring Road. It was about a 50-lot subdivision, and there was huge concern about the drainage coming through that subdivision because on the other side of Geyer Springs, it was already, not Geyer Springs, Chico Road, isn't it? It was Chico Road. On the other side of Chico Road, no. John, what street was it?
Geyer Springs.
Was it Geyer Springs? I was right the first time? Okay. So we already had, this was open land. We already had a drainage problem that was going across Geyer Springs, and it was bothering the residents and apartments on the other side. So we had them do detention ponds and those kinds of things. So does this improve a subdivision like that? were we looking at a 10-year storm designation on that subdivision, and now we look at a 25? Or am I off base on the whole?
Well, you're looking at it on the minimum design, yes, but the detention is set for a certain storm regardless of this minimum storm designation. So detention is a separate part of the drainage manual that has to be adhered to regardless of this minimum year storm event. Some of the criteria that you talked about for that subdivision had to deal also with the floodplain and the 100-year storm. And this would not affect that. They would still have to show the 100-year design and where the floodplain was and how it would affect, or is going to be, and how it would affect the building lots.
Okay, well, it's easy for me to understand some sort of application that this would help with.
Where this primarily helps with is on the, and Director Honeywell can come up and correct me if I say this wrong, but that's the minor storm easement. So in other words, you design the system to be minimum right now at a 10-year storm, and that also includes your inlets, your storm drain inlets. And so the way our guidelines said is you have to, carry the 25-year storm, in our piping system, and then also you have to show where your 100-year storm is going through the system. Well, when your inlets are designed for a 10-year storm, they're not, they are smaller, not necessarily designed to carry the 25-year storm capacity, so you have more of a bypass when you put a 25-year storm to it if they're only designed for a 10-year. This aligns all inlets and also the minor storm events to be that 25-year storm. So you could potentially get less bypass.
The inlets in that subdivision, were they designed for a 10?
I cannot speak to that. I haven't seen the, that's something that I could get that information and get it to you and let you see what it does. That's not saying that a developer can't do that or doesn't do that because it's also based upon how they're trying to catch it, where they're trying to catch it, and is there a bypass, and most certainly you don't want to allow a bypass to go right down and, by a home site. And so that's something that I have to look into and get you a specific answer to that and look at the drainage design with Public Works.
Well, it helps me if I can put a real live application to what we're talking about. I've got another situation where this is an existing subdivision where this lady's backyard fills up with water, and there's not a drainage system. There's inlets on the street, but there's not a drainage system in back of her house, and so she has no place for the water to go. People have put up fences, those kinds of things. So will this help with her situation? We're talking about 25-year storm drainage, and then we also talked about erosion control. So is this for existing subdivisions, or is this for brand new planned off the plats putting in?
This would be for, because anything that's been built and existing, they fall underneath the code that they got built in. This would be for any potential replats, that could be a condition, or new plats or new subdivisions.
Okay. Or if they extend off an existing subdivision?
Anywhere that they would do improvements, there would be a limit. If they are improving parts of roadways, that would take into consideration of that. Or if they are grading portions of land that may not be tied directly to the subdivision, but is an open space, that's part of the plat.
Okay. So everybody that's out there now I don't think I'd ever heard that on a 10-year storm designation or 10-year storm plan. So in the future, there'll be 25. That could be helpful because we have a lot of drainage issues in Southwest, so that can be helpful with that. Talk to me about the site plan review. I kind of missed pieces of that. Okay. You indicated that the staff was going to take care of that. So are we talking about something that's already zoned for like residential or commercial, and the developer comes in with the site plan And you're saying that the staff will take a look at that and make the determination as to whether it's approved or not approved?
That's correct. The site plan review was specifically for certain zonings. It was not for all zoning designations within the city of Little Rock. And as we have seen also and it really is not tied to it directly, it's tied to it indirectly. We had a case, and Tom can speak a little bit about it if he chooses to do so, but it's called the Richardson case that I know that, Vice Mayor, that you're aware of, that if a plat met all of our ordinances and codes set forth and there was no variances requested,
Right.
then it's approved.
Right.
And so it's kind of the same principle. It's if you have a site plan, you're zoned correctly, so you're about to do a site plan within an O2 office zone. Right now, as it reads, that site plan has to go through review at the Planning Commission. It doesn't come before the board. It goes to the Planning Commission currently, only if appealed. But if there's no variances, then that's not necessarily needed. We felt that as long as there was no variances for a site plan, then that doesn't need to go through the Planning Commission. That's part of that streamlining. If there is a variance, then we would take it to the appropriate board or commission to do so.
Okay, that's a concern for me, and I understand that the law is what it is, but it's going to be a concern for the neighborhoods too, because chances are you already have a property that's zoned, and in many regards, the site plan review without variances is just a piece of paper pushing. It's not anything, there's really not decisions to be made as long as they, as you said, don't have variances. So that's going to be a little bit confusing for the community. They always have this hope that, well, I didn't want this development there, so I go to the Planning Commission, and then when they get there, it's a site plan review, and there's really not anything anybody can do at that point. So that's what you're talking about in those. Okay. Is there any other situation under that staff approval?
If you're looking for just the site plan review for staff approval?
Yeah.
Well, that's inside all of those zoning, that's what that approval is. If there is no variances to be requested, either like a height variance from the Board of Adjustment or some other type, then we would stick back with the building setback, requirements and landscape requirements per that zoning and review it. And if they meet all of the ordinances and design guidelines as set by ordinance for that zoning, then those no variances, then it can be approved at staff level. I think we lost her.
Vice Mayor Wyrick. All right, we're back. Vice Mayor Wyrick?
Okay. I'm back on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This is my last one, I promise. I may call Jamie and talk to him about some other pieces of it since I missed it. But reducing the size of the lots from 7,000 to 6,000. So in Southwest, we do have some areas that have small lots, but a majority of the lots are pretty good size. What is the rationale from going from 7,000 to 6,000? And I think you're saying that the market is presenting that that's more of the size that people are wanting to build from. Have a lot of developers gotten variances for smaller lots? Are these like patio homes? Are these like planned residential developments? How does this come into play in your decision making?
And yes, there has been developers come before us and have to request variances on the lot width and the size of lots because that is looking to be and has been a market-driven scenario. It does several things. It intensifies, the lot, the number of lots that you can put in a development just by the sheer reduction of the width, which helps offset the infrastructure cost and building of the subdivision. And then a lot of homeowners nowadays are looking for smaller lots to take care of, and so that accommodates that. So that was one of the dominant requests in speaking with the developers, that we look at reducing that single-family residential lot requirement. And again, I want to say that's a minimum. They could choose to do wider lots if the market starts to hold that, but this just allows them a little bit smaller lot and smaller square footage so that they can potentially, abide with the economic time that we are right now.
So it's the economy.
It's the demand, let's put it like that. It's the demand of what has been requested by not only the people that are purchasing those lots to build those homes and the builders, but also helps offset infrastructure costs because you have more lots to do that.
Okay. All right, well, that was my last question. Thank you for putting up with me.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wyrick. Director Peck.
And I'm sorry, but I lost sound just when Lance was asking questions and Jamie was providing answers and clarification about the Highway 10 DOD and the 1 acre. Anyway, I guess, Jamie, I can just call you, or if Lance or Jamie, you can recap that explanation.
Let's do a quick recap, Jamie.
Okay, well, the recap is Director Hines asked a question about the 2 acre minimum removal to push it into a planned development, because his question was, did this align only with existing 2 acre lots within the DOD? And the answer is, the way it was written is, that does not. It would pick up those existing 2 acre lots, but if somebody had a 4 acre tract and they wanted to subdivide it within the DOD to 4 1 acre lots, it would still be the same. It would remove them from having to go before as a planned development within that DOD. And I think he just expressed concerns with his constituents in his area for us to kind of look at that, and we're going to work with him on that, if we reword that and how we do that.
And I'll jump in, Jamie. Director Peck, what the concern was is kind of 2 problems. You've got an existing number of lots that are less than 2 acres because they're already developed on both sides. And so you're basically forcing somebody who can't ever meet a 2 acre minimum into the PCD. And so what I thought we were trying to address is just those existing lots, but what Jamie said, it's made it broader and further basically taking away the 2 acre minimum, which I think may be an issue, and that's what probably have more discussion. That's why I was asking for you to consult your constituents too.
That's what I thought you were, that's what I imagined your questions might be, and I would have concerns too, and I'd like to be part of that conversation as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Mayor, I think that when we first started working on this, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago with Directors Peck and Hines, I think they're right. We were focusing on the existing. You remember the map that we did? Right. And so I think we can come up with some language that addresses that.
Addresses that.
I think that
Okay.
helps.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Mayor,
Director Wright.
I would like staff to look into this boundary street ordinance that is, as it applies to single family, because to me, something should trigger it. I don't want to hinder an individual from building a home on an infill lot if it's on a substandard street. I don't want to hinder that. But if this person that's building this house comes back and builds 2 or 3 more, to me that ought to trigger us to require something, some street improvements.
I understand, and I made the note to it, and I will be getting with
we
Public
got to do
Works and
something.
the City Attorney's Office to see what we can do in that language.
Because this is not getting any better, and I was over in Junior Deputy yesterday, and same old, garbage cans on the street, big ditches, can hardly get down the street. and then I get the gentleman that wants to build the duplexes to call me with, trying to get me, get something changed so that he can get his duplexes built. I understand his issue, but he didn't understand our dilemma, that when I get these calls from people that live over there or nasty emails, why does the city keep letting people build over here and bring in all this traffic and you all not fixing any of these streets? I mean, it's just like a vicious cycle. So it just seems to me, if I want to buy a lot, say in the John Bear Addition, that doesn't have this infrastructure, that's fine. But if I am a builder or developer and I build 2, 3, 4, that ought to trigger something. Can we do anything, Mr. Carpenter?
Director Wright, as you were speaking, the thing that struck me is, when would we do it? I have a hard time requiring boundary street improvements for one residential home. And the example you gave is, well, if the same developer does it, and the problem I've got with that is that'll work one time, and then the developer will get a straw man to come in and get it rezoned and then do it.
What do you mean rezone?
You would never get into the 2 or 3 or 4 lots.
What do you mean rezone? It's not. This is straight subdivision.
Okay,
He's just
come in and get the building permits to build the thing, and not have to do it because it's only one. I mean, that's really where the problem's going to be. They'll figure that one out pretty quick. And if a developer comes in and says, I want to do 5 homes along this street, that's easy. But if they find out that means they're going to have to be doing street improvements and drainage and all, they won't come in and ask for 5. They'll come in and ask for 1. And I think probably the real answer to the question you're asking is this, is that if that is of significant interest to the board, then the board needs to know where are those streets and fix them first.
I know where mine are, and I've got a lot of infield lots that are affordably priced. So and it's all over. It's not just over that street and over that street. I got it all over, and I don't want to discourage people from building nice homes.
And so,
but what do you do?
Director Hines.
Okay. Tom or Jamie, or would I be safe to say that a lot of these unimproved roadways were brought into the city that way? Open ditch, more than likely they were annexed into the city as...
It's the majority of them, yes.
I think if we wanted to get creative, either establishment of some type of, if you could identify those by tract and sect, and maybe do something that way. I think it's going to, and I know we've got some of those same issues in a few spots in Ward 5 off of Canis Road, where basically these are road, and we're doing the improvements curb and gutter right now to a lot of those roadways, but there's still a lot to be left. And I haven't had I think most of the developments we've had, the builders come in and done it as a residential development, so he's done the house street improvements. I think you're seeing some opportunistic building there, but I get it. And what we're trying to balance here, and I think for all of us, with the ability to change lot size to a smaller minimum lot size, it lends itself to building more affordable housing. You're already seeing pushes in the marketplace in Little Rock. Part of the reason is older folks, they were retired empty nesters. They don't want a big yard. They don't want to do that. But there's also another sector to that, is being able to build affordable housing. And if you can make the density higher, and I'll tell you, talking to our developers, Little Rock's one of the more expensive places to do development because we have higher standards than some of our competing folks. So the ability to have more density would hopefully, and I think would lead to more affordable housing. But same thing, I think we're going to have to be very careful to get that road development, but also not put so big a onus on that developer that the houses aren't affordable. Because at the end of the day, whoever buys that house is going to pay for that road improvement. That's the way if you come out to West Little Rock, everything's done under improvement districts. Well, guess who pays the improvement district taxes? It's not the developer who built them. It's everybody that buys a lot. They're paying for their own road improvements. And that might be a way we look at forming some type of improvement districts in those areas, so that instead of it being a lump sum on the front end of the purchase, I think we just have to get a little more creative. I think there's a solution, but we're going to get a little more creative than just the zoning code on it.
Well, thank you so much, Director Hines and Director Wright. And,
Thank you, Mayor.
And thank you, Director Collins, for taking this time and effort.
Frank,
you have a question?
I think, Jamie, how long have y'all been doing this? Bruce, how long have y'all been doing this? A year?
A little over a year.
This seems like a big issue to have one presentation and then make a decision on without having people have more time to look at it. Would it be wise to have some sort of period where people can see it on the internet and then put it off for another 2 weeks before we vote on this to give people, because my assumption is that once we do this, we're not going to go back and do it again anytime soon.
No, I mean, you've seen the number of pages. We're not looking to come back anytime soon to revise these. We went through detail, even looked at just the type of submissions. I think in the old ordinances it had submitted to us on 3.5-inch floppy disks. So, I mean, we really changed, a lot of stuff in a lot of the submission that's really the smaller portions that is not zoning or related, but it is actually procedure related. So we're not looking to come back anytime soon.
Well, these are questions that we've been debating for years and trying to find an answer to, and I'm not sure we have done a good, I think we're getting closer to getting, at least having something, but it just seems a shame to hear it tonight, vote on it in a week, and not have people have more time to have input if they want to, because we don't really have citizen communication, in all honesty, since people are afraid to come down here, and it would give people more of an opportunity to look at it. I'll be glad to do what anybody wants to do, but I would be in favor of putting it off 2 weeks and give it more time for people to look at it on the internet.
Sure thing. What we'll do, we will take item number 7 in 2 weeks, and so what we'll do is reconvene, and Bruce, if you will remind me that we'll reconvene, we'll recess the last meeting, kind of do it similar to what we did today with the CDBG, and in the meantime, Director Collins, if you could place both the executive summary, place the executive summary on the website, and then have your number and email for any direct, specific questions that goes in even more graver detail. Mr. Moore?
We were just talking just from a calendar perspective. We have a board meeting on the 5th. Do we just want to do it on the 19th? So we'll have the agenda meeting on the 12th, and then the board consider it on the 19th?
I think that'd be fine. If this is too important, and we just keep, I hate for people to say,
No, we'll agree with you. I just say we wait 2 weeks rather than, because that would be, what you were referring to is probably 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, just the next, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just recess our next board meeting, and then we will apply item number 7 for the next meeting that will be scheduled, because we won't have a recess.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Like Dr. Director Dean says, we've been kicking this a long time. I'm tired of kicking it. I would like to just table this and let staff go and research how some other cities do it. Because we can't be the only one in this dilemma.
And so I think we're talking about 2 different things, Director Wright.
I'm talking about this, and with the boundary street ordinance. If we don't do anything, let's do it with the boundary street ordinance. How do other cities do it?
Now, the boundary street ordinance is separate.
It's a part of this.
That's one ordinance, a part of 52 pages. Yeah. And so what I'm sharing is we can take the boundary street ordinance. I think that's more of a separate. I'm hearing a lot more passion there, but that's irrespective. Literally, we have things on here saying that you have to have a floppy disk. And so they've been working for a year on this. I do definitely agree with Director Campiris. What I'm asking and what I'm sharing is that the Boundary Street Ordinance, I think that's a separate issue of a larger issue.
Yeah.
And this larger issue is what staff has spent a better part of a year working on. But also I do understand what Director Pierce is sharing is to allow for a little bit more public comment, which we want to have, and the ability to review. And so what we'll do is in the meantime, between now and the next 14 days, is allow the community to share more feedback. We'll post it online and allow them to contact Director Collins more. But what I hear you most passionate about, as well as even Director Hines, is the Boundary Street Ordinance. That's something else we do need to take up. I think that's more something separate.
Well, I'd like us to take it up separate and do some research and
Yes, ma'am.
determine what's being done in other cities and try to come back with some type of options for us to look at, and then we can put it out to our building community and let them weigh in on it and help us solve this.
That'll be the next project.
Thank you.
That being said, we'll table this for 14 days, recess at our next scheduled board meeting. And then Director Collins, if you'll work with IT and communications to get get the executive summary as well as your number and email address to submit any inquiries to you, and we'll move forward from that standpoint. And Stephanie, if we'll also probably need to do just since we are in these different times, even a social media push, and even ask Director Collins to send out to all of the neighborhoods. I think we still have some of those email addresses to try to get that out as well electronically during these times. Director Adcock?
Mayor, I'd rather have this at a 6 o'clock meeting because more people can watch it on TV. More people can have the explanation from Mr. Collins. So you were suggesting a 4 o'clock meeting. I would like to see it on a 6 o'clock meeting. In my opinion, our problem here is that there was staff and there was a committee that set all this, and we did not talk to the directors who are the contact with the neighborhood people, because we've heard from Director Wyrick, Director Hines, Director Peck, and I think that we need more input with Director Hines calling and talking to the to the directors to find out exactly what our problems are with these. I have problems with 2 or 3 of these.
Director Adcock, we're talking about revising codes to bring us to the 21st century. Many of the comments that we've heard have been specific to the Boundary Street Ordinance. And what we're sharing is that we'll have more time for community feedback is what we're sharing at this point in time. Again,
Okay.
that's a separate issue is what we're sharing that as Director Wright would like, as well as Director Hines. Boundary Street Ordinance is separate and apart. We can make that separate and a part of this onslaught.
Well, instead of it being 21st century or something, I think it needs to work with Little Rock, Arkansas, and these directors are who's connected with the neighborhood people, and we know the problems that we have.
I agree. And again, what we're sharing is something separate. 21st century meaning that we're bringing us up to date to this current period in time in life. But we are going to have a separate project for Boundary Street Ordinance. Thank you. Moving from that, this agenda meeting is now adjourned.
You have item 8.
Did you have a question?
No, we haven't done item 8.
Well, we asked for questions for items 7 and 8, and no one asked for responded to item 8 during the middle of the agenda meeting.
Okay.
But we'll now begin the policy meeting. And Director Adcock, if you do have a question about item 8, after we get finished with the policy meeting, we can take that back up, so that's not missed. So to give Director Collins a break, we will ask Mr. Charles Blake to give us the census update, and then after the census update, we will bring Director Collins back up to do the short-term rental.
Thank you, Allie. Well, as you know, this is it is a new normal, and we gave you a census presentation earlier this year. I want to say it was mid-February, and from some extenuating factors, we had to update our census plan. Allie. So, as the mayor likes to say, we every time we talk about the census, we want to make sure that we're engaging and we are informing our residents here. So, as we previously stated, this 2020 census is the first year that you can do your census online. That is the preferred method to do it. 99.6% of Little Rock residents received a letter in the mail around March 13th, or that week of March 13th. We have continued to say that the census is a 3-step process. You have to open your census letter, save your number, and respond. This is a sample again, letting people know this is what the census letter looks like. It will have your census number in the middle. That's the number that you need to save. And this is a copy of the questionnaire. I want to the mayor filled his out in about 5 minutes. I have a little more. I had about 4 or 5 more sheets to fill out. Got 4 or 5 kids, so it took me about 10 minutes. But this is a copy of the census questionnaire. It takes about 10 minutes to fill out. So originally, these were the dates that the census provided for us. So around March 12th, March 13th, those letters start going home. We had our census. We had our event around that time. April 1st was National Census Day. The Census Bureau was going to start in-person efforts on May 13th, and this website and deadline was going to be July 31st. These are the new dates. So on June 1st, the U.S. Census field ops will start working again. From July 1st through September 3rd, the in-person group quarters counts will begin. By August 11th, those who have not responded, those follow-ups will start on August the 11th. All group quarter responses have to be done by September 3rd, and the self-response deadline has been extended out to October 31st. So they've extended from July 31st to October 31st. What we do not know is when the counts, what they have not let us know, is when the counts for the homeless shelters, soup kitchens, those type counts will happen. They have not told us that yet. So currently, as of yesterday, Monday, April 27th, Little Rock's current response rate was 52.4%. 42.5% responded online. So as you can see on the map on your devices, this is actually the response rate currently of all the census tracts in our city. The darker blue is the more people from the darkest of the blues would be 85 to 100%, and then it gradually goes down. Orange have been our hard to count areas and are still our hard to count areas. So if you see, we're still having problems in the South End, Southwest, east of 30. Ward 6, John Barrow has averaging around 50% responses. That's a little bit better than we see in Southwest. North of I-630 ranges in the 60 to 80 percentile. I can say that the top census tract for completing the census is in Ward 3. I think that's Director Peck's ward. So this is a real-time number of who has completed the census as of yesterday.
Charles?
Yes, sir.
Is that well, I get the 52 is percent of the population.
That's the percent of the census population of 2018. Yes. So as we look at the rates across the state and the nation, nationally we have about a 51.66% rate right now. The state of Arkansas is a little bit lower at 48.9. Pulaski County and Little Rock are both right there at 52.4%. When you look at where we are now compared to where we were 10 years ago, the final count number for the city 10 years ago was 65.8. So we are about 13 percentage points off, but we have until October 31st to make that up. And as we talked in February, we identified those hard to count areas.
Hold on one second, Charles. Director Computers.
Can you go back one?
Yes.
That slide? The 65.8, is that saying that in 2010, we only counted 65.8 of our citizens?
Yes.
But the good thing is, you see where we are today, and we still got into October.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. Some of the things we're doing to target, since we're going to use data, and we have the data of who has completed, how we're going to target those tracks. We talked in February about our hard to count populations. We have some highlighted here. As you can tell from the first map, those are the same areas. Allie. So when you look at those tracks, track 44, 42.6, that's been a hard to count area. That's downtown. Track 45, which is Children's Hospital, is about 35.4. Track 12 on Asher Avenue, it's about 30%. When you look at Southwest, look at track 20.02, track 41.07, 41.08, 41.03. Those are all in the 30s. But we're still having problems all across the city. When you look at north of 630, up by Mississippi and Cantrell, they have a 54.5% rate now, but last year they were in 10 years ago, they were in the high 70s, low 80s. Same thing with Green Mountain Drive, a lot of apartment complexes, so that's going to have to be a focus of ours. The two that stand out the most are track 19, which is right around Fair Park and UALR, and track 9802, which is right around UAMS and St. Vincent.
And Charles, let me just, before you go on, just want to make something up and acknowledge that Director Webb, it looks like you have the highest track going, and just want to acknowledge you in your particular area. I think Charles inadvertently said Director Peck, but I want to make sure you give the kudos to Director Webb.
Actually, it is Director Peck. She does. It's Ward 4. It's the district right up there. That is the little area that carves into Ward 3 from Director Peck. But
is that the new lines, or
no? That's the line lines.
All right. I just want to make sure.
I know my lines. Again, that is where we're having the problem. That is the hard to count areas, but we have to focus again on who the hard to count population is. Those of our kids, our minorities, English second language speakers, low income, homeless. So this is the list of people we've historically had a problem counting. So what we want to do is make sure we focus on where we're having issues and who we're having issues. So before COVID, pre-COVID, we had a great plan. We were moving right along. We had a great census event out at Southwest. We had about 250 people attend. We passed out about 13,000 flyers. We publicized the event on urban and Spanish radio, and we had sponsors that range from the U.S. Census Bureau to First Security Bank, First Community Bank, Rena Gilliam Allstate, La Zeta Radio, and La Raza Radio. I'm learning. Next slide, Allie. So this is just some pictures of that event. I took my kids out. It was a great event. It was very family friendly. It was focused on the Southwest area, and there was goodie bags passed out, T-shirts, flyers, lots of selfie photos. So it was just a great start. So in what we also wanted to do was focus on making sure we had videos going out from the mayor, from public partners, from the mayor, the county, and North Little Rock. And what we're going to do right now, really quickly, is play one of those videos of the mayor. I want to give special thanks to our comms department. They are churning and burning in this time with COVID and census. So let's.
Hey, Little Rock, it's Mayor Frank Scott Jr. taking some time out right now for something that's vitally important to our city and our state. That is the United States Census. Little Rock is the state's capital city, and we play a major role in Arkansas's complete count. We want to ensure that every Little Rock resident takes time and attention to complete the United States Census so we can receive all the funding possible for our hospitals, for our schools, and for our community. We have to take this very serious. Right now, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, we all have a little extra time on our hands while we're staying home and stay safe. Now, let's be creative and take some time and attention right now, whether it's on your cell phone, your iPad, or your computer, to complete the count. We want to ensure that every member of your family, every member of your friend community takes this time. So please spread the word. We want to complete the count for the state's capital city and ultimately for our state that we can get as much federal funding as possible. I'm getting ready to take mine right now. Please come join me.
Hand sanitizer on the desk.
That's what I'm talking about. Hey, Little Rock, it only took me 5 minutes to complete my United States Census. I now want to issue you a challenge. If you haven't already completed your census, please do a video, whether on your cell phone or your iPad, and tag me at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Frank Scott Jr. On Instagram is actually Frank Scott JRLR. So I want to issue that challenge. Tag me once you complete it because we want to increase our numbers for the city of Little Rock, being the state's capital city. Let's lead the way and have our complete count for the state of Arkansas. I also want to take some time to issue another challenge to the city leaders that are what I would call the public CEOs. That's the Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority. That's the Central Arkansas Water. That's the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, Rock Region Metro, Little Rock School District, Pulaski County Special School District. All of these organizations have leaders. And I'm asking each of those leaders that I've referenced, take time to complete the census. And I want to see a video of you as well. It only take about 5 minutes unless you got extra people in the household. Of course, they'll take a little bit longer. But I think we can all do it and ensure that everyone in Little Rock is counted and represented because Little Rock counts.
So the important thing about that video is that there are 3 key messages that the mayor is putting out there, which will drive us going forward. One is that it's quick and easy to take the census. The second one is trying to encourage others to participate. If it's the city directors, our public CEOs, our department leaders, just trying to encourage a participation. And the third thing there is that post-COVID, it's going to be critically important that we have an accurate count on the amount of people we have in Little Rock. So the way we do that is by making sure we have a better than a 65.8% return completion rate, and that's going to be our focus going forward. That when we start to rebuild after COVID, that we can start that process right now by having an accurate census count. So those are the 3 key messages that we're going to have going forward. Skip the next video. And just go back to the PowerPoint. There was a second video of the mayor, Mayor Smith from North Little Rock, and Judge Hyde, just basically saying we're all working together. It affects all of us, so let's all be counted. And we've taken the lead on making and distributing those videos. Go back, Allie. Go back one. Okay, before. That's good. Now, beyond the videos, we have been on radio, we've done print, we've done urban radio, Power 92, The Box 96.5. We've been on Spanish radio. We've been on Univision, telling the same message. Get your letter, fill your, keep your number, complete your census. So we're going digital and streaming with videos. We're on radio. We're on television, but we're also having a daily social media campaign. And here are 3 examples of what comes from the city or from the mayor daily about our census. This has to stay top of mind. Yes, we are dealing with COVID-19, but the census is going to and will continue to be a priority. So we talked briefly about partnerships. CAW has provided inserts for the last 2 months in their bills. This is one of the examples of one of the inserts from April, basically saying 2020 census. It has our city logo there and talks about why it's important to be counted. These were our bilingual shirts that we passed out at our kickoff event with our hashtag Little Rock Counts. Great marketing, something that I still see people wearing these shirts daily. And if you've been around town, at primarily our hard to count districts, we have our street signs that are on the corners of high traffic streets within those hard to count areas. So we have placed these signs north and southbound and east and westbound at about 50, right around 50 in the city. So if you're on 12th and University, if you're on Colonel Glenn and University, if you're on 65th, if you're at Chico, and stop at a light, the probability of you seeing one of these signs is very, very high. So what we want these signs to be is a visual reminder that the census is here and that everyone needs to be counted. So we had an outreach plan, but it had to be revised. Dealing with social distancing, most of our focus for the 2020 census was going to be directly targeting hard to count populations, hard to count areas through canvassing. But we had to alter that plan because public health and safety is always top of mind. So we are transitioning from canvassing at the moment to figuring out how we can do phone banking and door hangers. So with the extended time we do have, we're still waiting to see if canvassing can be a part of our plan, but we're going to redirect from canvassing to dropping door hangers on doors and having phone banking. We're working now with comms to create what we just saw, that 52.4%, that meter, to put on the city's website so we can gauge real time where we are, what our completion rate is. So that's something that we can do daily. We're working with the school district to make sure that we are still contacting those parents, and not only in the hard to count areas, but the whole school district through direct contact through texting and phone calls. We're working on a messaging for our 311 for when people call in to make sure we're reminding people to fill out the census, and this is something that's very important, that we're going to use the City of Little Rock and census data to be intentional and to directly target those tracts that are underperforming. So with the real-time day-to-day data that we have, we we do know who's lagging, who's falling behind. So, for instance, Melissa Bridges let us know. We talked about track 9802, track 48 is around those two hospitals, around St. Vincent and UAMS. And a lot of those people who work in those hospitals live around that area as well. So we can understand why they may be lagging in filling out the census. They probably have their hands full at the moment. So we have, as a city, we have to be creative on figuring out how we make sure our healthcare workers have the time, have the opportunity to fill out the census. She also looked at some tracks like 1245 and 2102, and we're going to focus on targeting those neighborhood groups, those neighborhood groups of Goodwill, Wakefield, South End, Central High, Wright Avenue, Meadowcliff, to make sure we are getting that, getting the importance of filling out the census to those neighborhoods. So that's some of the, when we look at the data and when we look at the tracks, we can be smart about who we're targeting. And the last thing is we're going to continue to leverage our platforms, our social media, if that's boosting social media posts daily, letting people know that we want you to go online, call, fill out the census, but we all must be counted. Questions?
Director Richardson, Director Wright, then Director Compuris. Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Charles, for a great presentation. One quick question. If I understood you guys correctly, it seems like some of those poor parts of our communities are the hardest to get counted or get actual count on. Am I correct when I say that?
Just speak up a little louder, Director Richardson.
It seems like, from your presentation, it seems like those poor parts of our city are the hardest part to get counted. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, yes.
But have we thought about partnering with any of our community-based providers, whether they're funded by the city or not, providing supportive service in those poor, marginalized communities, to partner with them to get that information out, to get them to help us, since we've been helping some of them for so long?
Now, we've had conversations with some of those groups. There's a group, I want to say the Urban League is focusing on 12th Street. Now this was pre-COVID, we were having meetings, but we have had a conversation. We have been conversing on how we could work and partner with those groups who are already in those areas. The same thing goes for Southwest. So that's something that we are working on.
Well, that would be my only recommendation, that we have a lot of programs located in that area. Some that we provide funding for and some that we don't, but I think we have good working relationships with a lot of those. But if we can utilize them, they can help, I think, get an accurate count for those areas where they're having a hard time getting counting. And good counting and good presentation. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Director Wright, then Director Compuris, then Director Webb, and then Director Adcock.
Charles, you mentioned the John Bear area in particular, and so my question is geared to where, because I'm thinking if I had to hazard a guess, I would assume that it would be our multifamily.
Well, when you look at Ward 6, the John Bear area is right around 50%. It's light blue. If you can go to that count, if you can go to that map, Allie, the map that has the completion rate on it. One more, right there. That big light blue blob in the center of the map is basically Ward 6. Okay. Those are 2 or 3 census tracts that is right around 50%. So what you're looking at is I-630 going down John Barrow to Junior Deputy down to Asher. So that's
Colonel Glenn.
Colonel Glenn. I'm sorry. Yeah, I still call it Asher. Down to Colonel Glenn. But that entire area is right at 50%. That's not bad. Knowing this that it's probably going to be a hard to count tracked to start with. But knowing that we could geo-target that area, we can go in and geo-target Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 6, and Ward 7 and say, we want to pump our marketing dollars into these areas on social media, on streaming services, to make sure these people in these areas, in Ward 6, Ward 1, Ward 2, know that, make sure they're seeing the messaging. So that's something.
Well, the reason
yes, ma'am.
I wanted to get some clarification or chime in, because I didn't see us listed in your hard to count areas. Okay, so this would be my recommendation. Okay,
thank
great.
you.
I thought I had mentioned this when you did your initial presentation, and I'll bring it back up again. I have a number of multifamily complexes. I've got Trinity Village, Asbury, and Fair Oaks, and Chateau, whatever. Keep these names change so much, but anyway, these are not Metro Housing Alliance properties, but these places do receive a lot of vouchers from Metro Housing Alliance. And I didn't see them in here as a partner, and it would seem to me that those tenants have to remain in contact with the Metro Housing Alliance in order to maintain their vouchers. Would it not be possible to get Metro Housing Alliance to communicate with the people that have those vouchers and encourage them to complete the census?
So that's a great question. So one of the things that we're going to focus on, I know we talked about door hangers. That's going to be primarily to our multifamily complexes. Going through the door, putting something on the door saying the census is here. So we're going to have to work with Metro Housing as well as those housing managers to make sure they're open to us coming in and putting those door hangers are there. But that is going to be a focus from Green Mountain down to Bowman Road, making sure that we are talking to the highly mobile population.
Okay, I understand that, and I think that's a great initiative.
Yes, ma'am.
However, if I'm a voucher client and my case manager says, ask me, have I completed the census? You recommend that you please complete the census. That gives it a little bit more than just seeing a door knocker on my door.
Latif, huh?
Okay. You see what I'm saying?
Yes,
I mean, I think it's worthy of a conversation that because these vouchers have to be renewed.
All right, that's a great point, and we will get on it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Director Compuris, and then after Director Compuris, Director Webb, Director Adcock, then Director Peck.
Charles, thank you for doing all this, and I'm sorry to make you have to go through all this again, but I'm going to increase your work. The 52.4%.
Yes, sir.
Who gives you that? Does the Census Bureau?
Census Bureau.
How often do they update that?
Daily.
Daily?
Yes, sir.
Well, I know you've got a lot on your plate, but I think I would like to have you give us an update to show us where that number's going every 2 weeks.
That's fine.
It's just it's critical thing we're doing. It's the second most critical thing. We got to get the infection under control. But
absolutely, and that's why we're putting that meter on our website to make sure everyone knows where we are daily. But that.
Well, and then it would seem if what Doris is saying, I think is good advice. And if you're doing selective advertising, inducement, encouragement, to use the ward directors where you're talking about that ward.
Definitely.
is it would be, I think if you had BJ or Joan or Doris or Ken or somebody saying, go out and do this, it may have carry more weight.
Okay.
But if we're going to, if we get by, you know, I'll ask you later how you got that first number from 2010, because it makes very little sense to me. If we, how we knew we undercounted them so much. I mean, that we got a 40% miss in 2010.
Yeah,
it was actually big news on the amount of dollars the state missed from a census standpoint. So that's not.
That was the first conversation I had with the Census Bureau in May. Was we were disappointed with the turnout of Arkansas and the city 10 years ago.
Well, but I think that if we know now that we're at 52.4%, and we've got 2 or 3 months to get this done, that every 2 weeks it would be incumbent upon us to hear from you, or I would like to.
Yes, sir.
Just to say we're at 52.4, we're at 58%, or whatever we are the next time, and where we march along, so that we can all. I don't want to get to the end and then say, oh, if we just had something happen.
Yeah.
So that puts the onus on all of us to try to get ideas on how to do things, and that would be my suggestion.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Director Hines.
And Director Campiris, if you go to the 2020census.gov and type in response rates, you can drill down to the city and the census tract, and it gives you what the final 2010 self-response rate was for each census tract. So it's pretty handy update. So just to let everybody know, you can kind of go in and look. The opacity of the map is not. It's hard to kind of see delineation. You have to know your census tracks.
You have to know your tracks, yeah. That's why I was telling the mayor, I know my lines.
I just saw a couple of board members because you said a particular ward name. I know you knew the lines.
It was Ward 4.
We'll digress. Director Campiris, but again, I just want to share with every city director before we get to Director Peck, then Director Adcock, and then Director Wright now. The initial census date was April 1st, is that correct?
That was Census Day. Yeah, it was National Census Day.
I mean, we're doing pretty dang good to be close to where we did in 2010, and Census Day was April 1st, and today is April the 29th, and we got 6 months out. So, I mean, great job to city directors, great jobs, more importantly, to the residents of Little Rock that are really doing this in the midst of a pandemic. Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Charles, could we get this PowerPoint by email?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and thank you very much for doing it and for this update. Have we sent flyers out in the, and I may have missed this because we lost the sound a little bit, but have we sent flyers out with any of the meals that we're doing, any of the grab-and-go meals?
We're waiting. We have an order of 4,000 this week. Oh.
Hear you.
We have an order of about 4,000 stickers that'll be going on the meals. It should be coming in this week.
Director Webb, did you hear that?
Yes, I did. Thank you. And what about with, I was, before our meeting, talking to the food banks around the state about the census and about putting flyers in food boxes, since we don't have individual contacts, but that's where more of the hard-to-count folks are going to be at different food distributions. And have we sent flyers out that way yet?
Yes, Director. I spoke with Tamiko and I sent her the flyers, and we also talked about having a conference call with the different food pantries to see who's open, available, who wants flyers, so that we can distribute additional ones.
Okay, thank you.
Director Adcock, then Director Peck. Then Director Wright.
Last Friday, we did a food drive in Southwest Little Rock, and we provided food to 750 families. Today at the outlets in Southwest Little Rock, they had a big food drive, and they was out of food within 1.5 hours. So as Kathy Webb said, food places is one place that we need to hit with information.
You're absolutely right.
This Saturday, there is another event in Southwest Little Rock. It's a drive-through testing for the coronavirus. And we need to have those flyers to pass out Saturday. But I think we need to contact the food bank, and every time there's a drive, ask if we can go out and in the bags or in the boxes, put in our flyers to make sure that we're reaching the families that are the lowest so far in returning these.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a great idea.
Director Pett.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Charles. And Lamar, I know you're listening. If you've got some graphics you can send to us to help us push it out on our social media platforms. And then, most importantly, is there a prize for the award that's the most completion? Because Kathy Webb is pretty competitive.
Hey.
I'm tweeting right now and throwing down the gauntlet, saying Ward 5, let's kick Ward 4's. You know,
No, Director Pack. Director Pack, I said Ward 4 is kicking Ward 5's butt. That's what I said. I didn't say.
You know, whatever. No, but seriously, I'm going to create a video, and you know, Ward 4 is going to win. Anybody want to bet on it?
Oh.
Anybody? Kathy?
Friendly wager.
Hey. No, just kidding. But thank you. I know how important it is, and we need some levity every once in a while, right? So is there a prize? I really want to know. No, just
He went back to the prize. Mayor?
Whoever wins can put a pie in my face.
Oh, I like that. Really? Okay.
But it has to be made by Director Pett.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I know just the one.
Okay.
It will be vegetarian, don't worry. Pescatarian pie.
Pescatarian pie.
Mayor, I have a quick question.
Director Wright was next, just to kind of keep in order. Director Wright.
At 50%, are we not in the lead?
Actually, Ward 4 would be in the lead right now. They're averaging around 65 to 66% right now.
Okay, so I got to get busy. But
yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask if you had reached out to our larger churches or any of the churches that are doing virtual church like ours. We have anywhere from 1,000 people tuning in, and we do the full scope of the service so that the announcements are still being.
Yes, ma'am.
And if we could do that, that would be, I think, would be a very, very beneficial way to reach some people.
That would be a great idea. We probably can get the mayor to do a video, announcement video about the census. They can be packaged to churches. So yeah.
And tomorrow my church is partnered with MAPCO and several others. And
our church.
We actually have already done that.
I don't never see you at the regular. You go to 11 o'clock.
9:45. We've got three services.
Yeah, well, see, I'm an 8 o'clock person, so I don't know you. Anyway, I know your daddy. Back to what I was saying. We're partnering with MAPCO tomorrow, and it's a grab-and-go meal and free gas and from 12 to 1, and members can come by. They're inviting people. That's a good way to reach out to people, too. Whenever these events are going on, we just need to make sure that,
absolutely.
and they're putting it all on social media, so everybody can see it. So we just need to have a census presence up there. If it's just one person, just an hour, so somebody can show up there and have their census. Hey, y'all do this. Anyway, just thought I'd add that in.
Thank you.
Director Hines.
Yeah. So, Charles, just a quick question, because Green Mountain Drive sits in my ward on the kind of the eastern edge between Ward 4 and Ward 5.
So you see the orange up? Yeah, that's
right. So, big question there is, it's great that we're able to do this online and everything, but I do know that there's a lot of homes and houses, especially in that area. We've got a lot of subsidized multifamily in that area. Do we have, I know we may have planned something to have some type of mobile kiosk where people can come use the computer, but I think we're going to have to get imaginative where we can still do that. Or I know, just like Director Wright was taught, there's a WIC office right there on Green Mountain. There's a church, Remnant Church there. Maybe we could, hopefully we're reaching out to them to help us with that community there and that multifamily development.
That's a really good point. You know, we had actually had planned on West Central and Southwest and some churches to have labs set up to drive people to do it online and by phone. But hopefully when the restrictions get lifted and we have social distancing, we can figure out a way that's as safe as possible and to make sure that we have some areas set up in these hard to count tracks. We will know where they are. Right. So our marketing will be able to be fluid based on who hasn't responded. So that's things that we're looking at for the next two months to figure out where we need to go, where we need to focus our resources.
All right. Well, Charles, Director Adcock, did you have another question?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Charles, just thank you so much for you and the entire team that's been working on this project. Again, just want to commend everyone and more importantly, the residents of Little Rock for us to, at this point in time, to have 53% compared to 65 at the end in 2010. So that's very good. And we got 6 months to eclipse that, which will be a big deal for us to do. And I'm glad we're very close to getting where we were 10 years ago and still have 6 months to go. So really excited about that and the time and attention, and also to all of our city directors. And I just want to know who's going to put the pie in my face, who's going to win.
The director of that ward. With the help of the at-large.
With the help of the at-large, you're going to help them?
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So is it one pie or is it four? Which one is it? Do the ward gets it and then all the at-larges too? I would say four.
It should be
right?
4 pies.
That's right.
4 pies. It's only 4 pies if we get 75%.
Okay.
But thanks, Mayor.
Mayor, if we get more than 75, then could all the directors put a pie in your face?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I want to
let me cut him off before he promises something else. I want to thank Stephanie and Lamar and Marcella and John and Kendra and Michael Drake and Miss Bridges. You know, they've worked. We've met almost weekly, trying to figure out how we still prioritize our census during COVID-19. So, thank y'all.
Thank you so much. We'll now transition to Director Collins to give us our short-term rental update.
Good. Allie already had it up. Well, now it's a good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. As you see, we would like to present our staff short-term rental study that we looked at, which has been a while in doing so. What I would like to do is just kind of go over some summary why we're here. Then I would like to touch on, kind of define what is a short-term rental. Then I want to talk about kind of what's happening across the United States, some major U.S. cities. And then also like to talk about a little bit about what's happening here in Arkansas and some larger cities within Arkansas and what they're doing in the short-term rental. And then at the last, I'm going to go over what Little Rock has right now existing in our ordinances, and also what we would like to propose for y'all's consideration to look at revising the code and what we are looking to have. So, Al, if you go to the next slide. Why are we here? Well, as y'all have seen over the past definitely year to year and a half, there's been definitely a growing demand for short-term rentals, not only here in the city of Little Rock, but in the United States and also in the world as a whole. And a lot of this has been due to just the way our growth is in this city, and also that most of the companies that they're doing, they're increasing and streamlining their process. And some of these that we have, the Airbnb, which is a company, Flipkey and HomeAway, they've streamlined it to a point that you can do it on an app on your phone and rent something wherever you are, and you're looking at it. And with that, municipalities are looking at the legality to that, how that is happening across their municipality, and looking to preserve the culture of the neighborhoods, the identities, but also some of them are looking at the rental markets, how it's affecting long-term rentals, and also trying to preserve some of the rights of the property owners in their ability to rent the spaces that they're looking to do. Allie, next slide, please. So if you're looking at a short-term rental, what we are talking about predominantly in all the municipalities is typically 30 nights or less in short-term rentals. Majority of the planning codes across these municipalities, both the U.S. and in the state, treats them like commercial, and that's primarily why they're getting taxed at the state level for a hotel, motel tax. But also, they're trying to prohibit going into residential zoned areas, and if they do, the proper permitting and licensing to do so. And I'll kind of go into some of that as we look into the further slides. Allie, next slide, please. So in all these cases that we've seen, and the ones that are going to come before you in the future agendas, you're going to see proponents of it on why they would like to see it, and typically that's the applicant, and then you're going to see people in opposition that come before you. The proponents, they're talking about, to offset their cost of housing, and that's be it whether they are living in that home and also renting it out, and also if they have bought the home and they're living somewhere else full-time and they're just looking to rent the house out or the home or a room for this short term. Sometimes it's easier to do that than to try to find a long-term rental, to try to just maximize their unused space in there. And it also benefits, I'll talk about benefits, some of the tourism dollars, within a municipality. That aligns more, and it's been happening more in the city of Little Rock to be more of a destination city, but you see more of that in larger cities like Nashville, where there are vacation cities, the Gulf Coast. The opponents, what they're looking at primarily that we've seen is just how it impacts their neighborhood, their local rental stock. And there's different aspects of how it affects their neighborhood. It could be from parking, the trash, noise, and just that it is transient in nature, and also that it takes away from the area's conventional hotels. Now for us, the opponents, they say the public tax revenue. Well, currently, with an agreement that we have with Airbnb, we are receiving the sales tax, or the hotel tax for the state is being received from that company right now, but not necessarily others. Allie, next slide, please. What this is we went through and researched some major U.S. cities and what they are, how they are handling short-term rentals. I would like to focus in on just two of those to kind of keep some of this brief. One of those is San Francisco. If you look at that slide, then I don't know if you can see it here. It's a little far away for that. It's kind of small, but I'll call it out. In San Francisco, they must register as a business and as a short-term rental. Hosts must be a permanent resident. They can have up to 90 nights a year without the host being on site. And then they said that there is no income restricted affordable housing on that. They implement the ordinance in February 2015. If they are caught doing this without, it's a daily fine, could be up to $484 a day. They have a licensing fee yearly of $250, and they're also applying additional taxes of transient occupancy tax and a business personal property tax. The other one I chose to talk about is on the opposite side of the United States in Boston, which is newly implemented in January of 2019. Again, they must obtain a license, must be primary residence or in a secondary unit at their primary residence, and then no income restricted units. Their fine, if caught, is $100 to $300 a day, and their permit fee is $25 to $200, and then their tax is the same tax as a hotel. Al, if you go to the next slide. In researching some of the larger cities across Arkansas, Fayetteville one was the dominant one that is going through the process that we're going through right now, just questioning short-term rentals. And I can say right now, they did request a study. They have prepared draft ordinance. It has been reviewed by their planning commission, but has not been acted upon by their board yet. It is on hold at this current situation. How they look to handle it is what they're proposing is two types of short-term rentals. They call it type 1 and type 2, and it would be analogous to a person that lives or resides at the place and one that does not reside at the place. And then they're also looking at putting a cap on the number of short-term rentals within their jurisdiction based upon the amount of homes and rental spaces they have out there. And I didn't get an opportunity to put it in this slide, and it would take up a couple slides, so I will be forwarding this to the board just for your reference, so you can have what they're looking to put into their ordinance, so that you can see those aspects of it. But if you also look down to some of those in Springdale, they just have an agreement like we do at the Airbnb just to collect and remit the taxes only, and no really regulatory framework other than that. And then Searcy at the bottom is just, they're looking to draft their regulation for the codes for short-term rentals. And we have also been in conversation with the Arkansas Municipal League and what they're handling it and what's happening across the state. And what I have shown in here is analogous to what they're seeing in other municipalities. Ali, if you go to the next slide, please. So the purpose of maintaining or regulating short-term rentals in Little Rock, what we're looking to do on here. And primarily what we want is we're looking to weigh the benefit of an individual wanting to use their home or a space in their home or an accessory dwelling outside their home to the benefit of that property owner, but also trying to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood and to make it equitable, an equitable short-term rental policy for the city. To do so, the key factors that we looked at is we wanted to maintain the quality and the character of the neighborhood. And that really is good for both the actual individuals that want to rent in a short-term rental and also for the neighborhood. Because people that are going in and renting these short-term rentals, one of the draws is that it is in a neighborhood. That is not sitting around a big commercial entity, that they're actually coming into a home. And so we believe that is an aspect that we want to look at. We also are looking at controlling the spread of unregulated parking on the residential streets. And in some aspects, and it depends on the locale of the short-term rentals, that can be an issue, and other sites, and it depends on the actual lot itself or the building itself. They might have ample parking for a family to come in, but they also might not, and it's on-street parking. And we do have those areas in town that all is available is on-street parking. So we really need to look at that aspect of it. And then it was one of the aspects that I think that I've talked about before with the board is as the short-term rentals do come up, and if they do get approved, we're also looking at how many and what happens on a block, because that does change the character a little bit from whether it is single-family, residential, owned homes, and then whether it even turns to a rental, be it long-term or short-term, or whether you have a block of 10 homes and you might have one or two that short-term rentals may look different than if you have 7 of them as short-term rentals, down the block. And so there is an aspect that when you do short-term rentals, it is a commercial aspect and a transient nature that we really need to look into. And then also creating equity in the municipal tax collection. And as I stated, one of the companies is doing that, but there are other companies, as I mentioned before, They really need to look at getting this in place for any short-term rental company that wants to come in, and people have provided that service to them. Then also, one of the key points that we talked about at staff level and also building code is when somebody rents out a home, be it, for the short-term rental, since it's more analogous to that commercial rental, really there's a safety issue, a building issue that we really need to look at. There's a difference between if a person is renting just one single room out inside the home and if they're renting the entire home out, as far as building codes and life safety. And I go on at the very end, and I'm going to explain that more in detail. But we're looking at life safety standards, looking at smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, just routes of where people, if something does happen. Because when they come into a place in Little Rock, they might not have ever stayed in that residence or that location before. And so just knowledge of where everything is in an emergency is a very good thing to do, and we believe to put in some of these residences that are looking to do that for short-term rental. And then that's part of that also equitable. A key point is just looking at both sides of the issue, both for and against, for the private residences to generate some income from property they may have. And because I know that there is instances where a person may be living in a home on one, and in the back they have a second, detached place above a garage apartment that they may be able to rent out and utilize that space. So we want to also look for that. And then we also want to provide accountability for issues that arise from short-term rentals, from some of the concerns that have been raised at the citizen or neighborhood level. What does happen if parking becomes an issue, or if noise or if trash becomes an issue? We need to have something in our ordinance that allows us to go in and give them notices or cite them and get everything repaired. Al, if you go to the next slide. As I stated, we went through and looked at all the lodging options within the city of Little Rock, and the number of short-term rentals varies, and it varies by day to day, month to month on there. And then on this one slide we did have an error because it does say with 4 different dates on the next slide, but in reduction of trying to limit it down to presentation time, we removed those slides. But I can tell you that this one shows at that time we pulled this, the slides that made the study, it was at 305. We've pulled it different times over the years. I've seen it go down to about 240 available inside the city limits of Little Rock. I've seen it up to about 310, 315. So I would say on the average you're looking at about 280 is what we have in the city. And then that could also, I've seen where some of the lodging now that's showing up on some of the sites for these companies is also vacant hotel motel rooms that they're looking to do. So some of those is also intermixed with that number, and that's hard to pull out of that. But I'm just letting you know that that is an option, that they are starting to see some of that on there when we look at that. Al, if you go to the next slide. This is, we gathered data and provided by LRCVB, and I thank them very much for their time and effort that they gave us this data. The data that they got was not broken out by ward, it was broken out by zip code. And it's hard to probably zoom into that, but as I think we've stated before, the zip code of 7205 is the largest. It has about, out of that number, it had 86, and that would correspond. I went in and added to the map, and if you look right above where the 86 is, it looks like Ward 3 is right above it, and that is the dominant number, is what we're seeing in that Ward 3. And that is also why we went and met with the Hillcrest Neighborhood Association at that time and talked with them about some of their concerns in there. And so this kind of map kind of shows you where all the demand is. And as you can see, we was talking about demand as it goes further out west is reduced. And primarily that's because of the covenants and restrictions those new subdivisions have in utilizing your homes for rental or short-term rentals. Al, if you go to the next slide. So if you look at it, out of that, right now 84% of the 305 are listed on Airbnb, 10% are listed on HomeAway only, and the remaining 6% are listed on both, and it's not uncommon to have multiple listings on these sites. And then on the next one is you can see that 70% of the rentals through these two sites represents entire home rentals, and 23 represent private room rental, and there's 2% that represents a shared room rental. And something that we found out, which is very interesting, I want to make a point of, is over the past 12 months, we looked at, in that data, the primary source of the bookings for those rentals inside the city of Little Rock. We listed the top 3, which are Little Rock, Fayetteville, Austin, Dallas, and Houston. And so Little Rock is in the top 6 of people living in Little Rock that are actually going online and booking short-term rentals inside Little Rock. And we see that, and we talked with staff in LRCBB, and we believe that is from people that are here, that people are coming in visiting. They might be coming in prior to this. Now we're in the pandemic, but it could be coming in for events at a ball game or conventions. And so people in Little Rock are renting these for people that are coming in to do that. Al, if you go to the next slide. So why should the city of Little Rock regulate short-term rentals? And I've went over these points. We want to improve the business license and the tax compliance. Right now, we do have the tax compliance with Airbnb, as I stated, but we do not necessarily have the business license. And obtaining the business license will help us in the compliance with the building safety regulations that is on down in that. When they apply for the business license and the zoning, we'll be able to go look at the facility, see what they're trying to rent out on a short-term basis, and make recommendations from the fire marshal and the building code official on what they need to add for what they're looking to rent. It also would allow us to regulate and look at the parking issues, potential issues, or the potential noise issues, or the potential trash issues, and allow us to have a means to come in and cite them and take them to court if they do not comply. It also, improve the responsiveness to the surrounding neighborhoods, because they will be on the books as, a business. So that if we see something, we'll pull them up, we'll talk to the owners of the property that are licensed and look at what the regulations are and get them to comply within the regulations adopted. And also, it gives us the ability to address any future short-term rental impact on available, affordable rental housing. And I want to say this, currently, the city of Little Rock does not, and we researched it, does not have an issue with available rental housing and how the short-term rental will affect that. Other municipalities, especially in the larger municipalities, they do have that issue on the availability. And so right now, we do not, but it would allow us to look at that and regulate that in the future. Al, if you go to the next one, please. So the positives to that, it increases the options of where you can stay in the city, attracting more tourists to the city, more tax dollars spent to the city. That is an option for them. It gives the people who own the properties an opportunity to host and earn money from their short-term guests, renting the spaces, to offset the cost of their housing that they've bought. And as I said, it also benefits directly from the tourism dollars, and also from what I've seen and the people that I've talked with, some of them that are adjacent to, that actually are for short-term rentals, they like the ability of that transient nature to discuss and talk with people in the area when they come in. And also allows people to come in and see a cultural neighborhood, like the historic Hillcrest neighborhood, to come in and look at what other neighborhoods have, rather than just going to a motel, sitting down in one of our commercial districts. Some of the negatives is the traffic generated, from the additional trips the people are coming in, where you might have a home that just has a family in it that may make 2 or 3 trips a day. Typically, when people come in and rent, they're making more multiple trips that day than just the 2 or 3. They're going somewhere, they're seeing something, so it will increase it. It will also increase potential parking demand in areas that all they might have is on-street parking. It could also increase the noise and the trash as left in there. That's a potential. And also the potential, as I discussed previously, about being spot commercial, where you might have 2 or 3 together, clumped together on a block, which could change that a little bit. And also raise negative concerns of the character in the neighborhood and the loss of the neighborhood quality. But as I said, that kind of plays on both sides. People are renting the short-term rentals to get that neighborhood feel, in there, and the neighborhood doesn't want this whole thing to turn commercial, for that. So Al, if you go to the next slide. So currently, how are we handling short-term rentals? As we're doing it right now, it doesn't really fall underneath a bed and breakfast. We do have a bed and breakfast, and we also have a boarding house, but those are typically done more of commercial. The way that currently that we've been handling it is we've been doing planned developments for both single family homes, whether they are there living on the premise and whether they're not, to come before the board commission to do so. We feel like this can be handled. The bed and breakfast ordinance is not a broken ordinance. We believe that there's a way to go in and modify this ordinance to accommodate concerns that staff may have for that. Because also there's a parking requirement for the current bed and breakfast if they have an additional room that they're renting, or 2 rooms, they have to provide an additional parking space for that guest. And it also sets a cap on what a bed and breakfast is, which is at 5 guest rooms. When it goes above that, we're looking at more of a boarding house type scenario, not a bed and breakfast. So Al, if you'll go to the next slide. So what we're proposing for y'all to look at for a policy change. And so as I deemed, we're kind of looking at this in 2 scenarios, whether it is owner-occupied short-term rental or whether it is they're not occupied short-term rental, they are off-site. On the owner-occupied, we feel there's a little bit less concern. They are there. They're going to regulate their property. They would have a business license, as part of this policy, and therefore they have a little more at stake that they're there. So we feel that going through a special use permit process, which would tie this use, this rezoning, to that property, to that entity. And special use, an SUP, a special use, only goes through the Planning Commission. It would still have that public comments. The neighbors would still be notified, and that would allow them to come voice their concerns at the Planning Commission. And in doing this, how do we take care of the existing ones that are out there? Right now our current staff level is down at the office, but even doing the sheer number that we have, that I've shown to 305, even taking all of them through the Planning Commission, we may do 300 zoning applications through the Planning Commission, and I'll potentially go into the board a year. And so that's a big hurdle to do that. So in doing that, we're also proposing to give a grace period of notification, that we would have to engage in a third party, and they have them out there that would search the internet and find these addresses. And then we would call them, and we would send letters out just to say, hey, we've noticed that you're doing this. And they would give them a period of 6 months that they could come in for staff level and review and approval of their application, because those are the lesser concern on short-term rental, that people are actually living there on the property. And that's just a proposal for a policy change. We would still want that one to go through a special use permit at the planning commission level, even after the 6-month grace period. But if they're operating, the thought process behind that is if they're operating now, and we've really been driven on complaint-based situation on these short-term rentals, and we haven't heard a complaint, then odds are right now if they're having, well, right now it's, I guess, stopped at a state level, but if they're having short-term rentals and there hasn't been any complaints filed with us, they're probably operating okay. And that would allow us to go investigate it at a staff level and talk to everybody and approve that for a short period to try to process some of these 200, 300 something short-term rentals that are actually living on the property, to get them licensed, to get them in, to make sure we're getting the taxes from them, to make sure we're inspecting the places and that they're putting in appropriate safety measures for life safety issues. If the owner does not occupy the property, we're proposing that it goes through a planned zoning development process, because this is no longer a dwelling, it is truly a commercial property. And to do so would mean that it would have to go through the process of being heard publicly and at the Planning Commission, and also come to the board for approval. Al, if you go to the next slide, please. So in revisions to the current codes, we're looking to put verbiage in there to acquire the business license, to make that. We also want to make sure that we're adding adequate parking codes. And that will depend based upon the residents involved. You know, some properties, as I explained before, may have ample parking in the driveway or a pad out back. Other properties may not. It may just be parking on the street, and we really need to look at that. We also need to implement an inspection program with our building code official and our fire marshal, you know, to look at what they have, what they're renting out, and whether smoke detectors need to be installed or fire extinguishers or directional signage to do so. And we also need to put it in cycles so that we go investigate that on an ongoing basis, maybe not every year, but a sample basis, depends on how many we have in the city, that we can go see for compliance and make sure that the extinguishers are not out of date, that we're actually looking for the safety of the renters that are coming in too. And that goes with the placard displaying of the safety of the exits, how to get out. And also, another point that was brought up in our building code reviews, and that is just the number that may have fireplaces, may also have working fireplaces that somebody that's renting may decide that they want to use. And we just want to make sure that those are done in a safe manner. We spoke with the fire marshal's office, and we believe that somebody that may live there that may not use it, but when you come in and you're renting, they may just decide to use the fireplace. So we want to make sure that if it's there and there's a fireplace in the home and it looks like it's available to use, that they make it available to use, or they close it up so that nobody can use it, so we don't have a hazard at a later date. And then we need to put in codes to establish if a neighbor does have a complaint, how they file that complaint with us, and how we would respond with that complaint. So with that, if you have any questions, we listed some sources that y'all are welcome to go to and look at, and I'd be happy to address any questions you may have at this time.
Director Adcock?
I would like to have a copy of this to go over again, because it just was so quickly and everything.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have some questions, but I'd like to go over it before I ask the questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Director Wright?
from your map, it appeared that there were 23 short-term units in Ward 6. Where did you get that information?
That is broke out by the zip code. And so, yes, right there by 7204, it listed as 23. We did not get specific addresses from the data that was presented to us. They give it to us by zip code. So a portion of that potentially is in Ward 6. Some of that may be.
Well, you got go back to that slide, because it looked like you had the wards.
Yes, we did. I put the ward slides in there to kind of see where y'all were located at, with also the zip codes that was.
Can we go
on
to
there.
that slide?
Yes, Al, if you'll go back a little bit. That one right there.
Okay, so I see 23 up close to where there's 72211, and then I see 23 where you're over at 72204. So is that 46 or 23 is the same?
That is 46. That is 23 in zip code 72211 and 23 in 72204.
Okay, well, if you look at this, well, I guess that's the way you got it broken down.
And like I said, that's zip code. They didn't break it out by ward. They don't have the ability to do that. But as example, I know that there's zip codes in 72211 that reside in Director Hines' ward in that area. It may be a small portion, but there is some that resides in that ward.
But this looks like...
And we don't know the exact addresses to tell you exactly the number that's within the wards. I tried to show you kind of where the ward boundary was relative to the zip codes.
Well, this looks like the 72211 is all in Ward 6 with 23 potential short-term rentals. So, okay, I just thought that was kind of startling, but it did show that that's all Ward 6, so interesting. Now, did I understand us to have an agreement with Airbnb where they are paying us the tax currently?
Yes.
And we're not looking to change that. That seems to be, to me, a really good
We're
way
not
to
looking
do
to change
it.
that.
Okay, thank you.
Director Fortson, then after Director Fortson, Director Peck. Director Webb, sorry.
Jamie, when you and I discussed this earlier, we had these numbers that the Convention Bureau put together, but I don't recall any differentiation between those that are just totally for rent structures and those that are owner occupied. Do you have any idea of what that division is?
I do not at this time. I can get the data that we pulled was from LRCVB, and I'll have to get with them to see if we can break that down more. I don't think they have that differentiation either, because I was a little bit surprised to learn of several instances where entire houses were in that program and in neighborhoods, and obviously the city was unaware of it until the tax question came up. Well, Director Fortson, I misspoke. They didn't break it out by addresses in there. There is on one of our slides, 75% of the rentals through just these, the two sites, the Airbnb and HomeAway, represent entire home rentals. 23% represent private room rentals.
So really what you're saying, if that number is correct, then 75% of those are just little freestanding motels.
That's correct. Once you get into the way we're looking at it, you're renting out your entire home. You are not there. It is a hotel, motel. You're getting the taxes. You're using it as a business.
Have there been any complaints? I'm aware of some because I was involved in one meeting at your office from one neighborhood association. Have there been any complaints that have been directed to your office about any of the rentals from the standpoint of abusive renters, unpleasant neighbors, et cetera?
We've had a few, and the ones that we've had complaints on has been brought before the board for a rezoning matter, or they have stopped renting the property out.
Okay.
Some of those complaints were founded for the parking in the area. I can't really say for the noise, because some of the noise complaints that they had were after hours, and we didn't receive any other complaints other than the fact that it was being used as a short-term rental. But everyone that we have received complaints on, we've investigated, and then the majority of them have come before the board for approval. And so it is a very small percentage of what we've seen complaints on.
One last question. I know you were proposing part of them as like bed and breakfast. And in your study of other cities, is there a differentiation between how they administer and regulate those that are whole property rentals as opposed to those which are single room or like a bed and breakfast? In other words, is there more control, city control exercised over the whole property rentals?
Yes, there is, and that's why I was reading a little bit of San Francisco's. Some of them municipalities have come in and just banned them in its entirety, and I don't know, and city attorney would have to give his opinion on that, but I don't know if that's a legal way to do that. But definitely they have took sites that you're doing your whole home rental, and they have implemented that as being, they do not want the whole home rental. They're going to treat that as a commercial entity and not put that under a short-term rental. They're going to put it under something else like a bed and breakfast type where it is strictly commercial. You know, as I read for San Francisco, you know, the hosts must be permanent residents for their short-term rentals to be counted as such. And so it varies by municipality. You know, some of that's been doing this for a while has changed some stance on how they handle this, and others are just letting them happen. Nashville is one of those that I can also send some information on to where you apply everything online. It's regulated, but it is not dismissed as something they do not want.
Thank you.
Director Webb, then after Director Webb, Director Campiris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jamie. As you mentioned, you had been to Hillcrest, and we had a huge crowd that night. There are a lot of people from Hillcrest and other parts of Ward 3 who are still watching, and I'm getting several questions. And rather than try to ask all of the questions that they're asking me, I'll just ask a couple of things. And Joan already asked that we get this so I can email it to them. But when do you think we would expect to move forward on this, given that there probably will be quite a bit of questions that we get? I mean, one thing they're already telling me from Hillcrest is they were hoping that the permit would stay with the owner, not the property, so if somebody new buys the house, that they would have to apply on their own. That's just one question I've gotten in the last few seconds. So could you share your timeline?
Well, the timeline is first we want to get feedback from the board and what they would like to see as a policy. Then we would have to draft that ordinance and suggestions what we want to put in. And then I would like to go out and have some neighborhood meetings in the area with Hillcrest, let them see the ordinance that is drafted, and then bring that back before the board for final comments and revisions for adoption. So, I mean, right now at the state level, they're not allowed to have short-term rentals as a directive by the governor. So I would see this, that if we get this completed by the end of this year, I think that would be a good thing to do. I think sooner than that, one, because of the timeline what we're having in this pandemic, I think we're not in a mode right now that we have to do something right now. They've been operating prior to the pandemic without a lot of problems, but I do not think that we need to hold off for a year to do it again. So I think that if we have something by the end of the year, I think that's a good time frame to look at. But I also think that is variable based upon comments that we may receive when we go back out to the public.
Thank you. And if I could just follow up on that, and I've mentioned this to you, when we were in San Antonio at the National League of Cities Conference, and I went to the workshop on this for some of the other board members, it was the most controversial workshop I went to. People were screaming at each other, and it was quite interesting. So I appreciate all the work that you all did, all the research that you did to get us to here, and I look forward to hearing from the neighborhoods and getting their input on this. Thank you.
And I can't answer you asked that other question about tying it to an individual. And both of the processes, a special use permit ties to the individual. So if the person sells the property, then the new individual that buys the property would have to get the same special use permit. A planned development
And that's,
definitely ties it to not only the property on a permanent basis, but it can be wrote in a way through an ordinance that it will tie it to an individual.
thank you.
Director Capiris.
Jamie, I appreciate it. It's an interesting discussion, and it's nice to know that at least the ones that the 500 or so you know about are paying the A&P tax. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When you start looking at this, I think you said that the number of complaints are low.
Yes, they're low. We brought a handful to this board over the past year.
Well, when you start looking at this and you bring it back, would you give us an estimate of the cost to start inspecting these facilities versus using those people to inspect rental property and the other things that we're concerned about? I mean, there's with the finite resources to inspect properties, I think this is an important issue we need to be concerned about, but I also don't want to take people away from inspecting rental properties and things that we're doing on an ongoing basis. So we have to have, I think, part of what I would like to see is a cost-benefit ratio of taking your staff and how many would be devoted to this, the cost of doing it, and the benefits versus having those people out doing inspections on that we need to be doing on rental properties.
We could do
on
that
an ongoing basis. So that would be my one issue that I would like to have you address.
Okay.
Seeing no other comments from the board, I do appreciate everyone's time and attention again as we spent today's policy meeting in regards to short-term rentals and our census update. I look forward to seeing everyone next Tuesday. Meeting adjourned.